Kyler versus Keim, Kyler versus Kliff, Kliff versus Keim, Kliff versus Bidwell, Keim versus Bidwell. A mashup here on Locked On Cardinals.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day, free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo Locked On, all caps, in the game. So I teased yesterday a little bit about me talking today in depth, in some capacity, about Jeremy Fowler and Josh Weinfuss's article about Kliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray, state of the franchise, and the future of Kliff Kingsbury. And I'm going to break down 3 different scenarios of what could happen to the Arizona Cardinals moving forward. There's one that's most plausible, one that's right in the middle, and then one that I can't fathom happening, but it needs to be discussed. And the 3 decisions to be made by Michael Bidwell will be the blueprint for the future regarding possibilities, regarding personnel, regarding employees, and regarding the overall outlook of this organization. Because at this point, the Arizona Cardinals are truly on a choose-your-own-adventure path. Conductor, Michael Bidwell. And it's going to be interesting to see if change is truly in the works or if we've just been fooled again. And with the 3 different methods by which Michael Bidwell can, brave this organization into the future, they're just going to be so different. It's going to be such a different path for each. And I just want to give the information, possibilities, and kind of talk about each little one individually. So first case, Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury are no longer employed by the Arizona Cardinals in the position that they currently fill. Steve Keim, GM, I'm sure Steve Keim will still be a part of the organization. I feel like they're going to throw away the key to the draft room, but I feel like he'll still be a part of the organization. And you know what? It's been around a long time. I can't really see him going somewhere else and being GM, first of all. So if you're not going to be GM somewhere else, why not be a senior advisor, make more money than you deserve, and just stay with the team? Kliff Kingsbury being removed, he may be the next offensive coordinator of Alabama. He may go over with Bill Belichick. We don't know. He's got friends. He can go wherever Clay Helton is now, he was supposed to be the OC at USC when Clay Helton was head coach. He's going to get jobs somewhere. Okay. So with both of them no longer a part of this organization, the positions in which they fill now, this is the best case scenario, in my opinion, for myriad reasons. One, Steve Keim is no longer hanging over the head of every conversation that we're having. I'm sick of talking about Steve Keim. I'm sick of having rational conversations, whether it be guests, crossovers on here, friends of mine on radio spots, or whatever, saying, yeah, this is what should happen, but it's Steve Keim, so it probably won't. I don't want to do that anymore. Is that selfish? Of course it is. But I don't want to do that anymore. So with Steve Keim removed, there's nothing to say that whoever replaces him will do a better job than Steve Keim, aside from hopefully a history of success in the draft and judging talent and building a roster. So everything that Steve Keim had in the shortcomings department, hopefully the new GM would have those as strengths, because there's a very, very distinct similarity between Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury. They can't do the simple things. They struggle at doing the simple things. The draft in and of itself is an entity that is marred by enigma and false promises and false performances and diamonds in the rough. And sure, it's a percentage game, and it's a film game, and it's a scouting game. And Steve Keim's draft record, although having nice moments, is an absolute atrocity. Simple things. His job as a GM is not simple, but being able to draft in the top 15 a player that can have an impact that a top 15 player should have is something that Steve Keim has struggled with, struggling with drafting the right position groups. Simple. Seeing need on a roster, drafting position group. Seeing need on a roster, drafting position group. Kliff Kingsbury. Cardinals are always in the top, in the last couple of years, been top 3 in offensive penalties. Oh, well, it's on the players. Yes, technically the players are the ones who are penalizing the game. And that's preparation. That's mindset. That's things that if it happens a couple years in a row, if it happens all the time, that's not just the players. That's on leadership. Timeouts, play calling, like the things that Kliff Kingsbury is being paid to do. He hasn't done well enough over the last 4 years to remain in his job. So if you remove both of them from the post, it is a create your own adventure situation. It is a tabula rasa, clean slate, giddy the hell up. Let's pivot the trajectory of this organization into an atmosphere that we may have never seen this organization reach. Consistent winning, stability, players truly wanting to come play here aside from a paycheck and retirement. Just because it's the way it's always been doesn't mean it's the way it always needs to be. And by removing Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury from their respective posts, that is a huge step in a direction away from what we've had over the last handful of years and 10 years with Steve Keim as GM. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. Case number 2. It's one that's like, I don't believe that this isn't going to happen until I see it actually happen. I will talk through that because it's a weird one. It's a weird one at this point. I'll talk about that next. Locked On Cardinals. First, though, this episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. I'm really geeked out to talk about this partner. Ever dreamed of becoming NFL GM and managing your football franchise? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the season, and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of a season. And all this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Cardinals listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On, all in caps, in the game. So that's Locked On, all in caps. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, Alex Clancy. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Hit a like on this video. Leave a comment. Let's blow this thing up, baby. If you'd like to go to the platforms, the Apple Podcasts, that where you listen. Leave a review. Hopefully you like what you hear. Keep coming back. This is your first listen to Locked On Cardinals. Thank you. Maybe make tomorrow your second listen. You're going to get to hear Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons. We do our crossover Thursday. Two teams who have interesting trajectories, some similarities, some major differences. I'm excited to talk to one of my good buddies here, Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons. We do a full crossover podcast tomorrow. So the article by Jeremy Fowler and Josh Weinfuss, the collaboration for ESPN about Kliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, etc. There were a lot of sources close to, quote unquote, player. Sources close to, quote unquote, sources close to coach, etc. And it seems like, from what that article reads, that there has been growing tension, and this is the tension that kind of ripped the Band-Aid off this season. And I said before the season started, I said all offseason, we're going to rip the Band-Aid off this organization, for better or worse. We're going to find out once and for all who Kliff is, who Keim is, who Kyler is, who Michael Bidwell is, etc. Now, the injuries were tough this year, but if you've listened to these podcasts before, if you haven't, regardless, I don't blame injuries before Kyler Murray tore his ACL on win-loss. Yes. Without having all of your impact players on the field, it is more difficult to win games. Absolutely. The rest of the NFL is injured also. So if you're going to lean on it as a crutch, I see it as a fool's errand, because the inherent underlying issues with this organization, if it was a high school team playing for the Arizona Cardinals because everybody was injured, if it was Keanu Reeves as Shane Falco playing as the replacements, it's still the same thing. Regardless of who the quarterback is, the issues have been the same. Regardless of where the injuries are, the issues have been the same. And just because there's injuries this year doesn't mean that this circus show should continue past this season. And it seems like Steve Keim won't return, but we don't know. Health-related issue. Hopefully he's getting better by the day. The second scenario of the future for the Arizona Cardinals: Steve Keim removed, Kliff Kingsbury stays. This is the sneaky one, okay? Because he's owed a lot of money. We don't know the exact amount still, which is weird. And I know that head coaches, not all the time, the numbers don't come out for how much the contract is. We just know it's an extension. So he's owed money through 2027. For the math majors out there, 5 years, starting in 2023. So does Michael Bidwell want to say, you know what? And they talked about this in the article, which was interesting. Do you want to eat that 5 years, buy him out, and get another coach you have to pay this year? Or do you say, you know what? Kyler Murray's coming off injury. He's probably going to miss some time. He hasn't had surgery yet. Maybe we bring back Kliff for one more year. What? It's an option. Okay? Because whoever comes in here is most likely going to be without Kyler Murray for a handful of games. Maybe not. Maybe he'll be back on time. I'm not a doctor. But if he hasn't had surgery yet and we're almost at the first of the year, thinking that he's going to be ready for game day when it's 6 to 9 months recovery time, I just don't see it. But, you know, I've been wrong once before, I think. I think it was one time back in 96. If you bring Kliff Kingsbury back and say the injuries are the reason why, that's bad, in my opinion. And it's bad because it stunts the growth of what could be if both are removed, Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury. And think about this realistically or rationally. So, and rationally is loosely defined here because we're talking in what ifs, in platitudes. But like when you have one of the two, Keim and Kliff, and you bring in a new GM, and say the GM drafts well, they've got a myriad draft picks, and they're going to have high draft picks in every round. And you have Kliff Kingsbury come back for another year. Like, does it make sense in some capacity to bring Kliff Kingsbury back for 2023? Sure, it does. In some capacity when the big picture isn't being looked at. But if you want to say, you know what, this was supposed to be the year. Everybody was injured. The offensive line Rodney Hudson was out pretty much the entire year. Justin Pugh got hurt early on. DJ Humphrey's been on IR. Like, Will Hernandez, like, people have been hurt the entire time. So how can you really gauge with Hollywood Brown, with DeAndre Hopkins, with Kyler Murray, how good this offense could be with the offensive line being pretty much decimated by injury? Like, maybe he didn't get a fair shot. Could you use that argument? Of course. But the reason why I shy away from it, is it doesn't matter who's on the field if the same issues are being had just like they were last year. Well, DeAndre Hopkins was out. He got hurt. After they went 10-2, he got hurt towards the tail end of the season. DeAndre Hopkins alone is not why the Arizona Cardinals fell unceremoniously from the 1 seed in the NFL to losing embarrassingly in the playoffs. It's just not. It was structural. Kyler Murray, high ankle sprain, week 7 on the last play of the game when AJ Green didn't turn around. Or week 8, sorry. Okay. Is that, I mean, so we're going to look at last year. We're going to blame injuries. We're going to look at this year. We're going to blame injuries. Let me tell you, spoiler alert. Plug your ears if you don't want a spoiler alert. There are going to be players going to be injured next year, most likely, too. You never hope for it, but players are going to be injured forever, in perpetuity, in this league. So if you continue to use that as an excuse, it would be an excuse to bring him back, not a reason to bring him back. It's a very clear distinction between the two. An excuse excuses inaction. A reason is solid background that strengthens the decision. An excuse is a deflection. A reason is a strengthening. And I see that as an excuse and not a reason to bring Kliff Kingsbury back. But is it a possibility that he comes back? Sure. Absolutely. If he didn't have that contract extension that started at the start of next season, I'd say probably not. And I don't think that he should be brought back, but is it a possibility? Of course. Is it a strong possibility? It's in the conversation because there's that out. Injuries. Bring him back. Kyler Murray comes back. This is the one where this is the one, guys. 2023 is the year. Maybe. And then I'm only going to talk about the last option just for a couple minutes because it's still an option and because it's the Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to talk about it. And maybe one of the more fascinating segments that I've talked about this season because of the pure lunacy involved in it and the fact that is it completely out of the realm of possibility? No. For those using deductive reasoning, you may already know what I'm going to talk about, but that's called a tease, baby. I'm going to talk about it next. Locked on Cardinals. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible's releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love, and that's why you'll be able to find an episode from The League available as a bonus episode on Locked On NFL. Narrated by Super Bowl champion and legendary smack talker Richard Sherman and sports broadcaster and rising star Taylor Rooks. The League is an 8-part docuseries about the most bizarre, inspirational, and unlikely stories connected to America's favorite sport, pro football. You won't want to miss the untold stories spanning from the 1940s through the present. And our bonus episode is called The Way of the Cowboy. And it's an incredible story of how the 1977 Dallas Cowboys brought in Bruce Lee's protege to teach their different martial arts, ushering in a new approach to the way the league trained. Each story offers equal parts history, entertainment, and social commentary. Head over to Locked On NFL for a bonus episode of The League or catch the full series wherever you get your podcast. Available now. Audible. Get in the game. And I do like to go local where I can. I'm really excited to have these guys sponsoring today's episode. Folks, if you live in a sunny state like Arizona, it's very likely that you have had a few people stop by offering you free solar. The truth is many of these companies aren't local, and because of that, they're using misleading tactics and end up overcharging homeowners. If you're considering solar, but something felt off, you're going to love today's sponsor, My Solar Nerd, My Solar Nerd, My Solar Nerd. Their mission's simple. Help you get the best solar system to fit your needs. And the guys at mysolarnerd.com are local and understand the nuances of going solar in Arizona. They've been doing this for a while and understand that an educated customer is a happy one, and their no-pressure approach will make sure all your questions get answered. Once you're ready, they'll put their industry knowledge to work for you by choosing the best equipment, warranties, and Better Business Bureau accredited installers. They'll also help you figure out all the credits and incentives you may qualify for, and they'll make sure you transition to solar as smooth as possible by managing the entire project for you and keeping you up to date along the way. Our listeners will get a $50 Amazon gift card when they book a no-commitment evaluation. This promotion is only for our listeners that are homeowners, so keep that in mind. Visit mysolarnerd.com. It's like Locked On and How Did You Hear About Us section. Make the switch to solar on your terms. Start your research process by visiting mysolarnerd.com today and show Locked On some love by letting them know we sent ya. Folks, going solar doesn't need to be complicated. mysolarnerd.com makes it easy. If you haven't checked out the article by Josh Weinfuss and Jeremy Fowler of ESPN, a collabo about Kliff Kingsbury and the state of the Arizona Cardinals, do it. You should. It's fascinating. So I kind of snowballed that into the three possibilities that we see in 2023. First, both Kliff and Keim are gone. Second, Keim gone, Kliff stays. And third, this will be a short segment, both Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury come back. So, how about that? Swim in that. Without any sort of joking, obviously. I hope Steve Keim, whatever's ailing him, that he comes back to full strength as soon as possible. Hopefully he'll be back at full strength tomorrow. You know, you want whatever it is. Hopefully we'll be back at full strength tomorrow. Can Michael Bidwell look his buddy in the eye and say, that's it? I don't know. Because I haven't seen it. Now, if they keep Steve Keim, there's no way they're firing Kliff Kingsbury, in my humblest of opinions. Because that would mean that Steve Keim would be responsible for hiring another head coach, something he's been awful at. But we do need to discuss the world where both Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury come back. I know the reports are out that Steve Keim, they're most likely going to move on from him. I know the reports are out that Kliff could be done by the end of the season. I know the reports are out by some books that have Sean Payton, the Cardinals being the favorite to land Sean Payton. I see it all. I won't believe it until I see it. And that's not to say, oh, I told you they were all coming back. I wouldn't know what's happening. This isn't me positioning myself saying, see, nothing changes. But I do think that with the perfect storms that would be perfect to fire Steve Keim, he's withstood a couple at this point. So what's to say that he won't withstand this one? And I feel like that is a pretty pragmatic and level-headed way to look at it, even though it's Looney Tunes. So the world where Kliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim both come back needs to be at least on the table or have 1% of the pie of possibility. I think it's probably at 8%, 10% that both of them will come back. If it's truly health related, which no one would think that it's not, he's not going to get fired because he's sick. So if he doesn't get fired because he's sick or whatever's ailing him, then would he get fired for his performance? And if he were to get fired for his performance, but Kliff Kingsbury were to keep his job because of the injuries, why wouldn't Steve Keim keep his job because of the injuries? That's what worries me. That's why keeping Kliff Kingsbury is a slippery slope. Because if you're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, that means that Steve Keim gets the benefit of the doubt for building a roster that would have been capable to win if there weren't for injuries. And that could be the back door into Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury both keeping their jobs. See, I make you think here on Locked On Cardinals. I make you think. There's no such thing as a foregone conclusion when it comes to the Arizona Cardinals. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. I'll be joined by Aaron Freeman tomorrow for Crossover Thursday. Talk to you then.